we didn't have any money because on the way over, the sailors on the boats that brought us over taught us to play a game called poker. And we didn't have any money. Gus said, why don't we get crabs and cook them and sell them at the PX. So I didn't know anything about getting crabs, so Gus said, oh, it's simple. So we get an old piece of meat from the mess hall, tie it on a string, and then go down to the wharf, and we'd let the string down with the beef on it, down to the bottom, let it set a while, and then pick it up slowly, and there'd be 3 or 4 crabs on it.
Oh.
And we'd hold them over a pail and shake them off. And then Gus knew how to cook them, and we'd cook them up. And we'd go to the PX, and we'd sell them for 5 cents a piece, which was pretty good. And so with that, Gus and I got a little money, and then we got to playing poker, and we were pretty good at that. So that's what we did in the Hawaiian Islands. Anyhow, I was selected to go to open an air base. I didn't know where. We left on a C-54 from the Hawaiian Islands. We landed at Kwajalein, and then our next stop, we just landed there to get fuel and so forth. Our next stop was Saipan. We came into Saipan at night, and there were no lights. They were under an air raid. And so the pilot, he did a hell of a good job. We landed. They got us off of the plane. There were several other people besides the 5 of us, and put us into a little bivouac area, and we had a tent. I can remember the first night there, I was scared to death. I had my rifle and my gas mask and my helmet and everything, and crowded and sitting trying to sleep, and the air raid continued. And this one they were strafing us with, and so I ran out of the tent, and there was a hollow in the ground that I got into, and there were 2 or 3 other guys got into that hollow too. And I can remember the Zeros coming after. You could see their lights flashing and their guns flashing.
Whoa.
Fortunately, none of us got hit. When the sun came up the next morning, we went to see what that hollow was, and what it was the hollow of a horseshoe pit that they pulled the stakes out at night so somebody wouldn't fall over them.
Wow.
And there was lots of room. There were 3 of us in there, and we had lots of room. But that was my first experience. We were there, the next day we took off. We didn't know where we were going to land. They took us on a C-47, and we went from Saipan, landed on Guam, not on the Strip, but Guam's a coral island, and it's all hard. So they just landed and dropped us off. The 5 of us dropped us off and took off. And we're just standing there wondering, where do we go now? So pretty soon a Jeep came and picked us up, took us to a bivouac area that the air transport had. There was probably 6 or 8 tents, and I was assigned a tent. I got laid down, and this is probably midnight, and there were gunshots, and they killed a Japanese right behind our tent.
Wow.
Well, see, the Japanese, originally Guam was an American island, and then the Japanese took it, then the Americans took it back again in like July, and I'm here, this is about September, and so Japs are up in the hills and they're hungry, So they're coming down to get food out of the garbage cans or wherever they can to get something to eat. And unfortunately, somebody shoots them. So anyhow, we set up an air base, and the first plane that came in was belonged to the Air Transport Command, but it was a civilian plane, and I can't remember which airlines, but they flew in and the airplane needed a $100 check. And the captain, his name was McCann, he was from Rochester. And Captain McCann said, does anybody know how to do a $100 check? And I said, yeah, I do.
Sure.
And a guy that worked out in the Middle West, his name was Cordonier, and he raised his hand, he'd done. So I became NCO in charge of inspections, and he became line chief. And we held that right up through till we got out, and we held every rank, private, first class, so on and so forth. And so I had a pretty responsible job. Every repair that we did on the C-54s, it had to be flown before it goes back into service, major repairs. And so as NCO in charge of inspection, I had to fly crew. In the C-54, the pilot and co-pilot and the engineer sits in the back of the controls in the middle. So I got quite a bit of flying time. And then we also had an old C-47 there that belonged to us, and so we'd all take, I didn't have a pilot's license, but we'd take it up and I'd fly it while we had it up.
Oh.
You know, and yeah, so I was there. The war ended in 1945, and then as they dropped the atomic bomb, and if somebody asks whether we should have done that or not, I can tell you, boy, I'm glad we did. We'd have lost thousands of people. Anyhow, then as time transpired, I got out on, they had a point system, and I think you had to have, I don't know, 36 or 38 points or something. Anyhow, I got out in February of 46, got back in the States, and back home on the 5th of March. Married Evelina on the 23rd of March, and that was it.
And when you left, tell us a little bit, the highest rank you had then
I
was
was a
staff sergeant,
sergeant.
E6.
I was a staff sergeant. I was a staff sergeant. This indicates that I was in the service overseas 18 months.
Okay.
And these are the battle ribbons
And the wings were indicative of
flight
what?
crew. Flight crew.
Part of the flight
Yeah.
crew, okay.
Flight
And then
crew.
what about over on the right-hand side?
That's
are-
a ruptured duck. That's what you got when you're thrown out of the service. That's the ruptured duck.
And then you came back to Attica.
Huh?
You came back to Attica.
Came back to Attica,
You married Evelina.
married Evelina.
And then what did you do for a job? You had coming back, you had to have a job.
Well, I belonged to, back then, the government would give returned veterans assistance, which meant that we'd get what I call the 5220 Club, where we could go to Batavia and sign our name for 52 weeks, and they give you $20. You go and sign your name, you get $20. $20 is a lot of money back in those days. To make things neat, just I just got out of the service. I just got married. I didn't have a job. A guy by the name of Speedy Smyers lived on Genesee Street. Speedy was like me, didn't have a job, so we started doing odds and ends. We painted the Esso gas station for Lloyd Stroop up there. We built sidewalks. We painted buildings. We'd do anything to get a few bucks. And of course, did a lot of fishing. And in September of that year, it was a pretty good life. September of that year, my wife said, I'm quitting my job. She worked for the New York Central Railroad all during World War II. And so she would go to Buffalo, ride, well, a whole bunch of people ran the Erie Railroad to Buffalo, and then she would transfer to a trolley and go to the New York Central Depot. Well, I think the building is still there, I'm not sure. And that's where she worked. So she said that September, she was gonna quit her job. Well, that means I gotta go to work. Well, Harold Ostertag, who was our local assemblyman, had been a good friend of mine and a good friend of everybody in Attica for a long while. Harold was a nice man. So I went to Harold on a Saturday morning and I said to Harold, I need a job. Evelina's quitting her job and I gotta have employment. He said, what do you do? I said, I'm an aircraft and engine mechanic. And I said, there isn't a big call for that right now. So he said, well, you like to hunt and fish. And I said, yeah. He said, just a minute, have a seat. So I sat down, he went in the other office. And I could overhear the conversation. And he's talking to, the name escapes me now, but the guy was assistant commissioner of the environmental conservation. It wasn't environmental conservation back in those days. And I could hear him say, yeah, he's a nice young man. I've known him all his life, know his family, good Republican.
Good Republican.
And he came out and he said, well, you got a job, you're gonna be a game warden.
Okay,
So
just like that.
I went down to training for 6 weeks, became a game warden, and came back and did that for a year. I remember that. Back in those days, it's different than it is now. I have a grandson that's an environmental protection officer now that has all the big vehicles, the snowmobiles, the wave runners, all that sort of thing, and he makes $80,000-$90,000 a year. My salary was $1,715 or something like that annual.
A year.
I furnished my own car. I furnished my own uniform, and that's what we did. We got $70 a month allowance. That was to buy gasoline, food, and whatever I needed. And when the $70 was gone, you walked.
Oh.
That was simple. So I did that for almost a year. And Bud George, my good friend Bud George, who just passed away, Bud was buying out his father, Leo John George, I think, who was partners with Gertrude Ireland in George and Ireland Insurance and Coal down here on Main Street. So Bud said, I'm buying out my dad. Why don't you buy out Gert Ireland? And I thought, well, I had some money from flying pay overseas. My mother, when she loaned me money to buy a car, I had to give her $20 every week that she put in the bank for me. So I had probably a couple of $1,000, which was a lot of money. And then I borrowed some money from my dad, and with that, we bought out